All right, here we go with chapter 14. And the title of the chapter is Out from Under the Grip. A train rumbled into the small station. It was a freight train, but that didn't matter to Corrie and the other women that just released from Ravensbrook. They climbed into the empty boxcars. Corrie found herself sitting next to another Dutch woman, Claire Prince. As the train pulled away from the station, Corrie thought about the last time she'd ridden on a train. 80 women to a car, no bathroom, and Betsy gasping for air. The memories flooded back, and soon tears were streaming down her face. Claire Prince, with her own memories and her own tears, put her arm around Corrie. "We are free. Free at last," she said between sobs. Corrie nodded and wiped her eyes. Betsy had been right. It was 3 days before New Year's Day, 1945, and Corrie and Betsy, each in her own way, were free. The train stopped many times, and as it did so, most of the other women from Ravensbrook got off to make connections. Finally, it was just Corrie and Claire alone in their boxcar. They peered out through the small holes in the sides of the car. Through them they could see the destruction of war. Hour after hour the train chugged through burnt, barren countryside and cities inhabited by old people and women picking through the rubble of their homes. Corrie wondered what Arnhem would be like. Claire Prince, who had been sent to Ravensbrook from Holland after Corrie, told her that although southern Holland had been liberated by the Allied forces, northern Holland was still in the grip of the Germans. The women were returning to Holland, but not a free Holland. Finally, the train stopped one last time and the boxcar's door slid open. A man was standing by the door. "You women have to get out here. The train tracks have been blown up and you can't go any farther by train," he said in perfect Dutch. Corrie and Claire smiled at each other. They were finally back in Holland. Corrie and Claire climbed slowly from the boxcar and looked around. The train had stopped at a station. A sign on the platform read, "Welcome to Groningen." Groningen was in the very north of Holland. To get to Arnhem, Corrie still needed to travel across the country. She didn't know how she would do it. But nothing mattered more right then being but nothing mattered more right then than being free and away from Germany. A young woman on the platform looked at Corrie and Claire. "Excuse me," she said, "but you might find help at the Deaconess Hospital. It's about half a mile up the road." Corrie thanked the woman, wondering how terrible they must look if a complete stranger felt it necessary to give them directions to a hospital. Slowly and painfully, the two women made their way up the street till they finally collapsed into comfortable chairs in the hospital waiting room. Within minutes, two nurses appeared. One asked Corrie to follow her, while Claire Prince went with the other. Corrie was led into a small office overlooking a garden covered with snow. Corrie could see the outlines of trees and bushes, which looked beautiful, even with snow covering them. "Tell me about yourself," said the nurse, picking up a clipboard. "Where are you from?" "Arnhem," replied Corrie. The nurse broke into a smile. "I'm from Arnhem, too. Did you know a Corrie ten Boom there?" inquired the nurse, and then she added, "She's probably quite a bit younger than you, I would think." Corrie stared closely at the nurse. "Truus? Truus Beans? Yes, it is you." "How did you know my name?" asked the nurse. "It's me. I am Corrie ten Boom," said Corrie. "You were in my triangle club." "Tante Corrie, don't believe it. Is it really you?" she asked in disbelief. Corrie nodded, wondering again what she must look like to other people. Corrie and Truus sat for half an hour while Corrie told her story. Truus ordered tea and a cookie for Corrie to eat while she talked. "What would you like most of all?" Truus asked as Corrie finished her story. Corrie replied straight away. There was one thing she had not had for nearly 11 long months. "A hot bath," she said longingly. Soon Corrie was lying stretched out in a hot, deep bath. It felt so wonderful as the water lapped around her tired, aching body. But even more wonderful was the knowledge that no one was going to yell at her when she got out, and no one was going to escort her back to a barracks or cell. Finally, after Truist had asked Corrie 4 times whether she wanted to get out, Corrie climbed from the tub and wrapped a clean white towel around herself. How wonderful it felt! After Corrie dried herself, she decided to look in the mirror hanging on the left wall of the bathroom. She stood by the mirror for a moment, summoning her courage. Then she stepped in front of it and looked. Staring back at her was a scrawny old woman. Scrawny, vocabulary word, exceptionally thin. Her hair was cut into short tufts, and her skin was deathly gray. Truist Benz brought in a new set of clothes. Corrie was glad. She hadn't been able to stop wondering whether the clothes she'd been given at Ravensbrück had belonged to some poor woman who'd been gassed there. She was glad to be rid of anything that tied her thoughts to that horrible place. Next, Corrie was taken to a private room where she was given a bowl of soup and then tucked into a bed with crisp white sheets, no less. And she had it all to herself, and no one was screaming in agony or cursing at her. She tried to stay awake for as long as possible to enjoy it all, but she was tired and was soon fast asleep. When she finally awoke the next morning, breakfast was waiting, served on a white tablecloth with a silver knife and fork. Corrie could hardly believe the luxury. Corrie stayed at the hospital for 10 days. With rest and relaxation, the swelling in her legs quickly went down, and she felt much stronger after eating 3 meals a day. She also took a bath every day, and Nurse Beans, that's spelled B-E-N-E-S, so it might be Benes, arranged for her to have the little hair she had left styled. But one problem remained. How was she to get back to Haarlem? The Germans had put a complete travel ban in place all over northern Holland. The only people who were able to travel about were those on official Nazi business. And while Corrie was being fed well in the hospital, all over Holland people were starving. It was a particularly cold winter, and trees were being ripped out of the ground so that every last piece of them could be used for firewood. People were also chopping up furniture to burn, boiling their prized tulip bulbs to eat. Dutch farmers in the north were forbidden by the Nazis to sell their produce in Holland. It was all supposed to go to Germany to keep the soldiers fighting. But many Dutch farmers found ways around the rule. One brave group was stealing food right off supply trains and trucking it south. News came to the hospital that if Corrie wanted to, she could ride in one of the trucks that was headed to Hilversum with a load of stolen produce. Corrie's heart leapt at the opportunity. Hilversum was where Willem, Tine, and their children lived. On her 11th night back in Holland, Corrie was ushered from the hospital into a large old truck. The truck lumbered through the back streets of Groningen without its headlights on because it was too dangerous to use them. Corrie prayed for a safe trip as the truck headed west. She knew they weren't supposed to be traveling, and at any moment the truck could be stopped by the Nazis. And if it were stopped, Corrie would be found riding in a truck loaded with stolen vegetables. She dared not think what would happen then. But she had to get home to Haarlem, and if this was the only way to do it, she was willing to risk being caught. The truck drove on through the night and pulled to a halt in front of Willem's rest home just as the sun was beginning to rise. Willem's rest home looked just as it always had. Corrie climbed down from the cab of the truck and looked up the path that led to the front door.